The city of Baghdad was wrapped in its usual midnight hush, but inside a cramped apartment overlooking the Tigris River, tension filled the air like static before a storm. Samir sat hunched over his desk, the soft blue glow of 3 computer monitors casting shadows across the room. The walls were plastered with notes, exchange charts, and sticky papers scribbled with numbers and dates. Empty coffee cups crowded the corners of his desk, signs of endless nights spent chasing rumors that never seemed to materialize. But tonight something was different. He could feel it. The world outside might have been asleep, but in the global financial undercurrent, something had shifted. For years, Samir had followed whispers about the Iraqi Dinar's revaluation, a dream that had consumed investors and skeptics alike. It was the kind of story that blurred the line between hope and delusion, between patience and obsession. Every time someone claimed it's happening, disappointment followed, but still, people like Samir watched, waited, and believed. He wasn't some naive dreamer. He had studied the markets, understood currency reform, and knew Iraq's economy had potential buried beneath decades of war and sanctions. But belief alone wasn't enough. Tonight he wanted proof. The clock ticked past 2:00 a.m. Samir rubbed his eyes, clicked refresh on his Forex tracker, and stared at the familiar lines of numbers, currencies that danced and fluctuated in an endless ballet of global value. Then it happened, a flicker, just a brief blink on his main screen. He frowned, leaning forward. He refreshed again. The column labeled ICT/USD had always been flat, frozen at the same unremarkable value for years. But now it wasn't. The number had changed. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone not paying attention. But Samir noticed a small decimal movement, so small it could easily be dismissed as a system glitch. But his instincts screamed otherwise. No way. He muttered under his breath. He refreshed again, checked cross references, opened a secondary charting site, and there it was, the same slight adjustment mirrored across multiple sources. His pulse quickened. It's visible, he whispered. The words hung in the air, fragile yet electrifying. He grabbed his phone and opened his Telegram group, a tight-knit circle of dinar enthusiasts scattered across the globe. He typed furiously, "Check Forex now, live rate movement spotted for IQD." Within seconds, his message exploded into a flurry of replies. Some dismissed it, others panicked, but a few confirmed it instantly, confirmed in Dubai. One message read, "Seeing it in London feed too." Another chimed in. Screenshots began flooding the chat, images of monitors and charts, each showing the same impossible truth. The Iraqi dinar exchange rate had shifted. Samir's heart hammered, years of waiting, watching, and ridicule from those who called him foolish. All of it collided into this single, surreal moment. He stood up, pacing the room, hands shaking as he called his closest friend, David, an ex-military investor in Texas who had followed the same dream for years. The call connected, and before Samir could speak, David's voice came through, breathless. "I see it, brother. It's live." For a moment, neither spoke. Silence between them wasn't empty. It was heavy, charged, almost sacred. Then David laughed, half crazed, half ecstatic. "We weren't crazy after all, Samir. It's real." Samir laughed too, his voice breaking. "It's real," he repeated. "We did it." Across Baghdad, thousands were awake, drawn to screens and whispers spreading like wildfire through encrypted chats and social media. Rate visible. Forex confirmed. Live update spotted. The city that once held only war stories and despair was now buzzing with quiet, cautious excitement. Taxi drivers messaged friends abroad. Shopkeepers turned on small TV, showing ticker updates from international channels. Something massive was unfolding, and everyone could feel the vibration of change. Samir tried to steady himself. He knew this wasn't just a number flicker if the rate was showing. It meant banks, governments, and financial systems were aligning behind the scenes. Someone, somewhere, had flipped a switch. Years of planning and negotiations buried in secrecy were now surfacing. He opened another window on his computer and checked a global currency converter. It confirmed the same new rate, still small but different enough to make his stomach twist. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the glow of the monitor. His reflection stared back, tired eyes, dark circles, but a spark of disbelief and awe burning inside. He thought about his father, who used to say Iraq would one day rise again, that the world would once more respect its currency, its people, its strength. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of that rise. He lit a cigarette, his hands trembling as he exhaled into the quiet night. The faint sound of morning prayers began echoing from distant mosques, mixing with the hum of the city below. It was as if Baghdad itself was waking up to something new, something unseen but deeply felt. Another ping hit his screen, a message from someone claiming to be inside a local bank. Confirmation: internal systems showing test rates changing across regional branches. Samir froze. That was the missing link. If banks were seeing changes internally, the shift wasn't speculative anymore. It was operational. The machinery of global finance had already begun to turn. He quickly saved screenshots, timestamps, and messages, his mind racing. Part of him wanted to rush outside to see if anyone else knew. Another part feared that speaking too soon could risk something fragile, something that might vanish as quickly as it appeared. He remembered the countless false alarms, the disinformation, the people who had lost hope, but this felt different. Every instinct told him this was real. Suddenly, his phone rang again, a local contact this time, an old banker friend named Khalid. "Samir, have you seen it?" the man asked in a whisper. "They're testing live screens. The rate is visible on some terminals." Samir nearly dropped the phone. "You're sure? I'm looking at it now," Khalid said. "It's not a test anymore." The call ended abruptly, but the words echoed in Samir's ears. "It's not a test anymore." He looked out his window at the flickering lights of Baghdad stretching endlessly into the horizon. The city looked the same, but in that moment, he knew the world was about to change forever. Samir closed his eyes, letting the reality sink in. The waiting, the ridicule, the doubt, it had all led here. The impossible was happening live, in real time, across digital networks and human hearts. He sat quietly for a long time, just listening to the hum of his computer and the faint calls of dawn. Then, almost instinctively, he whispered, "It's starting." Because deep down, he knew that once the number became visible, the clock had begun ticking on a new era, not just for him, but for Iraq, and for every believer who never stopped watching the rate, waiting for this one breathtaking moment when myth would finally become reality. The glow of computer monitors painted the London trading floor in shades of blue and white, a digital sea of data pulsing with life. Rows of analysts sat in silence, their faces illuminated by the endless movement of charts and numbers. It was nearly 3:00 a.m. local time, and most of the city slept, but inside the financial district, the air was thick with tension. The global Forex markets never rested, and neither did Claire Thompson. She leaned forward in her chair, eyes narrowing at a small irregularity flashing on her main screen, a flicker so subtle it could easily be dismissed as a glitch. But her instincts told her it wasn't. For 7 years, Claire had analyzed international currencies for a top-tier investment firm. Her job was to catch the details others missed, to see patterns before they turned into headlines. Tonight, her focus was drawn to a strange activity coming from the Middle East sector, specifically under the code IQD/USD. The Iraqi Dinar, that currency was almost a ghost in the Forex world, officially listed, technically tradable, but functionally frozen for over a decade. Yet now, the numbers were shifting minute by minute. "No way," she muttered, dragging her mouse to enlarge the live feed. At first, she thought it was an error, a delayed data feed, or a back-end test. But then she saw the same movement mirrored on 2 other independent systems. That wasn't random, that was real. The Iraqi dinar exchange rate was live. Her headset crackled with the calm but urgent tone of her supervisor. "Claire, we're seeing unusual activity on the Middle Eastern panel. Verify the data integrity." "I'm on it," she said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. She cross-checked the IMF latest update log, ran a currency movement scan, and pulled recent trading orders. Every source pointed to the same conclusion: "Sir, it's coming from the primary Forex channel. These numbers are clean. Confirm it." The voice replied, sharper now. "We need a second verification." Claire opened another program, a proprietary feed used only by senior analysts to monitor global liquidity flows. The data refreshed and her breath caught. The same rate fluctuation was visible here too. It wasn't speculation. The dinar was active again. She took off her glasses, blinking hard. "It's live," she whispered. Her words felt heavy in the silence of the trading room. Then she turned to her nearest colleague, Alex, who was still buried in his monitor. "Hey, check the IQD rate right now." He frowned. "The dinar, that's dead data. Just check it." Alex clicked through, and his expression changed instantly. "What the hell?" He leaned closer, eyes wide. "That's a live tick." Claire nodded. "That's what I thought." Within minutes, the quiet hum of the trading floor erupted into motion. Phones began ringing, chat windows blinked open, supervisors gathered around desks. "Who triggered this?" someone demanded. "Is this an error or an internal test?" another shouted. But as the confirmations poured in from Tokyo, New York, and Frankfurt, it became clear this was no glitch. This was a global update. Claire's inbox flooded with alerts from partner banks and analysts across time zones. Messages read like fragments of disbelief. Confirmed movement on IQD/USD, rates shifting globally, central bank feed active. She could feel the adrenaline surge through her veins. This was history unfolding, and she was watching it in real time. Her supervisor appeared behind her, his voice unusually calm but his eyes betraying urgency. "What's the confirmation status?" Claire turned to him, swallowing hard. "It's confirmed the feed is real, verified through 3 independent systems. The IQD rate is officially visible on live Forex." For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, almost in awe, he said, "After all these years." The trading floor was alive with noise now, keyboards clattering, phones ringing, people rushing from desk to desk. Traders were trying to buy, hedge, or analyze before the markets locked. The Iraqi dinar, a currency long written off as a relic of a broken system, was now breathing again. Claire turned back to her screen and watched the rate stabilize into a new figure, not massive yet, but different enough to send ripples across the financial world. The implications hit her immediately. If Iraq had reinstated its currency on the global market, it meant something monumental had happened behind closed doors, a decision at the highest level of international finance. The world had always speculated about a reset, a moment when undervalued currencies would reprice to reflect real assets, oil reserves, and national growth. She had dismissed those as internet myths, the kind of conspiracies that preyed on hopeful investors. But now she wasn't so sure. The data didn't lie. Across her screens, news feeds began to update. Unconfirmed Forex activity detected. Middle East currency live. Rumors swirl as IQD appears on trading networks. The mainstream media hadn't caught on yet, but they would. Within hours, it would explode. Her colleague Alex leaned back in his chair. "If this is real, we're about to see the biggest shockwave since the Euro launch." Claire nodded slowly. "And no one's ready for it." She picked up her coffee, now cold, and took a shaky sip. Her hands trembled slightly. She wasn't a believer in rumors or hype, but the weight of this event pressed on her chest. It wasn't just a number changing, it was the pulse of a nation returning to life, a financial rebirth that had been whispered about for over a decade. The sound of footsteps approached quickly. Her supervisor returned, speaking in hushed tones. "We just received verification from the IMF private feed. They're aware of the rate visibility. This isn't a leak, it's sanctioned." Claire's eyes widened. "You're saying this was deliberate?" He nodded grimly. The switch was flipped somewhere between 1:30 and 2:00 a.m. GMT. All Tier 1 banks are getting synchronization alerts. The revaluation is active? Her heart skipped a beat. The word revaluation hung in the air like a secret too heavy to contain. For years, financial forums and alternative news had buzzed about this, a potential currency event tied to Iraq's reconstruction and global restructuring efforts. Most professionals, including Claire herself, had dismissed it as nonsense, but now the impossible was unfolding in real time. Messages from Asia started pouring in, markets reacting to IQD change, Hong Kong traders on alert, private clients demanding confirmation. The movement was global, synchronized, unstoppable. Claire sat motionless for a moment, absorbing the magnitude. She thought about how the world would wake up in a few hours, ordinary people, investors, banks, governments, and realized that one of the most undervalued currencies on Earth had just shifted in front of everyone's eyes. A thought struck her. If this rate was live, then countless investors holding dinar across the world, people who had been waiting for this moment for years, were about to see their fortunes change. Overnight, some would become millionaires, others would see their lives reset in an instant. She exhaled slowly, staring at the glowing rate on her monitor. The number looked almost surreal now, frozen between myth and reality. She knew that by sunrise, this would dominate every financial headline on the planet. Somewhere far away in Baghdad or Basra, she imagined people gathering outside banks, checking their phones, calling relatives. Somewhere, someone was realizing that everything they had hoped for had finally happened. Claire whispered to herself, history doesn't announce itself, it just appears, one number at a time. And as the world slept, she watched that number glow brighter, pulsing like the heartbeat of a nation reborn. The world awoke to chaos. What had started as a whisper in the night had exploded into a global storm by morning. Television anchors on CNN, BBC, and Bloomberg spoke with wide eyes, their voices struggling to keep pace with the flood of reports pouring in from every direction. Breaking news: Iraqi Dinar exchange rate confirmed live on global Forex markets. The words flashed in red banners across screens worldwide. For decades, the dinar had been the subject of speculation, disbelief, and ridicule. But now, the undeniable proof was there, numbers live, visible, moving. In Baghdad, streets that were usually sluggish at dawn buzzed with life. Word had spread like wildfire through mosques, tea stalls, and social media feeds. People who had held onto their dinar for years, some out of hope, some out of desperation, were suddenly clutching them as if holding treasure. Banks opened early, lines forming before the doors even unlocked. Men in worn jackets and women in scarves stood shoulder to shoulder, some holding folders filled with currency notes wrapped in plastic. They murmured prayers, traded rumors, and stared at their phones, where the new exchange rate gleamed like a divine signal. Samir stood among them, heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't slept at all. The night's revelation still replayed in his mind like a dream he was terrified to wake from. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn, friends calling from Dubai, London, and Texas, everyone saying the same thing: it's real. It's confirmed, the rate is visible. He looked up at the massive screen mounted above the bank entrance, showing a local news channel. The anchor's voice trembled with disbelief. Reports confirm that the Iraqi dinar has been revalued across multiple international trading platforms. The new exchange rate is visible and active. The crowd gasped collectively. Some began cheering, others wept openly. A man beside Samir clutched his chest and whispered, "Alhamdulillah, it's finally happening." Inside the bank, the atmosphere was electric and tense. The tellers' faces betrayed exhaustion and excitement. Many had been called in at dawn, receiving orders from higher offices to prepare for unusual activity. The internal systems displayed new values, synchronized with global Forex. Behind the counters, managers whispered frantically into phones, verifying figures, checking instructions from the central bank. Samir stepped forward as the line moved slowly. He clutched his folder tightly, hundreds of crisp dinar notes he had held on to for nearly 10 years. To him, they were more than paper. They were his father's faith, his country's promise, and his own stubborn hope that Iraq would one day rise from its ashes. He remembered all the times people had mocked him for believing in the revaluation, calling it a fantasy, a scam. And yet here he was, standing in a bank overflowing with people who had all dared to believe the same impossible dream. As he waited, he glanced at his phone again. His Telegram group had exploded with thousands of messages. Rates confirmed in U.S. banks, due by centers exchanging, Tier 4B notifications live. The chatter was deafening, a symphony of disbelief turning into triumph. But amid the celebration, there was confusion too. No one knew what would happen next. Would exchanges be limited? Would the rate hold steady? Would governments intervene? Far away in Washington, D.C., high-level meetings were already underway. Officials from the Treasury and IMF scrambled to assess the ripple effects. Oil futures were surging, Asian markets were volatile, and currencies tied to regional economies began fluctuating wildly. The world's financial order had just been shaken by a single country pressing activate. Some called it the global currency reset. Others called it financial warfare. But no matter the label, everyone knew the world wouldn't be the same again. Back in Baghdad, Samir finally reached the counter. The teller, a young woman with kind eyes and trembling hands, looked up and asked, "How may I help you?" He took a breath, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'd like to exchange my dinar." She nodded, typing into her computer. The system hesitated for a moment, then refreshed with a soft chime. When she looked up again, her expression had changed. "It's confirmed," she said softly. "The new rate is live." Samir felt his throat tighten. "So it's real." She smiled faintly. "Yes, sir, you're among the first." His eyes stung. For a moment he couldn't speak. The sound of the printer hummed as a receipt rolled out. He took it in trembling hands, reading the numbers over and over again. The digits blurred through tears, not because of greed, but because of validation. Every doubt, every sleepless night, every whisper of "it will never happen" vanished in that instant. Behind him, people cheered as confirmations echoed from other counters. "It's live here too," someone shouted. A woman fell to her knees in gratitude. Others hugged strangers, united by shared disbelief. For once, Iraq wasn't on the news for war, corruption, or conflict. For once, it was the epicenter of something hopeful, a financial resurrection. Outside, the sun climbed higher over the skyline. News crews flooded the streets, broadcasting live scenes of celebration. Across the world, investors watched as headlines rolled nonstop. IQD revaluation confirmed, markets react. The dinar, once dismissed as worthless, now stood shoulder to shoulder with global currencies. Samir walked out of the bank slowly, the weight of the receipt in his hand feeling heavier than gold. Around him, the air was alive with joy and disbelief. People shouted into their phones, calling family abroad. Taxi drivers honked their horns in celebration. Even the soldiers stationed nearby smiled, though their radios crackled with orders to maintain order amid the swelling crowds. He stopped at the bridge overlooking the Tigris and gazed at the river that had watched his city rise and fall countless times. The water shimmered in the sunlight, calm and ancient, as if it too knew something monumental had happened. He thought of his father again, of the nights they'd sat together, talking about hope for a better Iraq. "One day this land will be worth more than gold," his father used to say. Now, those words echoed in his heart like prophecy fulfilled. He opened his phone one last time. Messages from around the world flooded his screen. David from Texas sent a voice note, his voice cracking with emotion. "Brother, we made it. The rate's real. We're free." Samir smiled through tears, lifting his gaze to the horizon. For him, this wasn't just about money. It was about faith rewarded, about a country finally reclaiming its dignity on the world stage. The Iraqi flag fluttered gently in the distance, its colors vivid under the golden morning sun. Somewhere in a quiet office in London, Claire Thompson refreshed her screen again, watching the numbers stabilize. In New York, traders clutched their phones, unable to believe what they were seeing. And in Baghdad, Samir stood among thousands who had just witnessed history, not in theory, not in rumor, but in reality. The dinar was alive, and with it, so was hope.